Hello everyone, it's John from THKP, and today we're going to be talking about Flutter animations. So you can see I have this completely empty project. I just ran Flutter create app and deleted everything except for these 15 or so lines. We're going to put all of our code inside this Mario animations demo, so let's go ahead and create that. And for this, why don't we just go ahead and return a scaffold with the background color of light blue. Alright, so as you probably expected, we have a lovely blue screen here. Let's start working on our animation. So I'm going to add an animation controller. And let's initialize our controller inside of our init state method. Okay, so you can see this red underline here. That's because I've used this, and this is not a ticker provider because it's just a state. So you can make it a ticker provider by adding a trait called single ticker provider state mixin. Trait mixin, similar term. Let's save so that formats. So yeah, what this mixin basically does is it just turns your class into, not only is it a state, but now it's also a ticker provider, which makes it a valid object to be used for this parameter. Okay, we have our animation controller. Now, before we get too deep into this, I do want to point out that Flutter has a lot of very useful built-in widgets for doing common animation use cases. We got animated align, we can move it from the left to the center or something like that. We've got an animated container, which is very useful. Basically, you can animate all the properties of a container, like height, width, color. You might have saw animated crossfade, which allows you to fade from one thing to another very easily, which is a very common use case. So I think it's a good idea if you're doing an animation to just check out these built-in widgets. Super useful. They do a lot of cool stuff. Another thing that you might want to check out is a library called Rive. Rive allows you to animate a vector illustration, and you can do some cool stuff like plug into user feedback, and they have a demo where there's like a creature that watches your mouse pointer move around. Very cool stuff. So I recommend checking those things out before doing something like this. But I do want to show off Flutter's animation API. I think it's very neat. So that's what we're going to be using for the rest of this tutorial. Okay, so let's discuss our animation briefly. I have this GIMP file set up, which has all the different parts of our animation. So we're going to have this Mario image, this box, this question box, and this coin. And we're going to do, this is pretty basic. We're just going to have Mario come in from the left side. He's going to pause momentarily, and then he's going to jump up, striking the box, causing the coin to fly out of the box. And then Mario's going to go about his life. And let's talk about the different properties that we're going to have to animate. So probably pretty obvious that Mario's position is going to have to be animated. So his X and Y position. We're also going to animate the Y position of this box and also the Y position of this coin. And another thing we're going to have to animate is the image that we're using for Mario. So just to show you, I have these 5 Mario images. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an animated frame property, which is just this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in order to control which Mario image we're showing. All right, so let's build this thing. I mentioned we need a bunch of different properties. So these are all the values that we're going to animate. And as I mentioned, the animation is going to be 5 sort of segments. So I'm going to set that up as what's called a tween sequence. And I'll explain what this means in just a second, but let me get some code out here. So tween sequence of double, and let's do a tween sequence item. So tween begin 0.0 end 0.5, and then a weight of, for now let's just do 1. Okay, now I want to explain what some of these things mean. So a tween is one of the simplest animation primitives, I would say. It's basically just an object that represents a range of values where as the animation progresses, it moves across that range. So pretty straightforward, but once you start combining these things together into tween sequences, you get much more interesting behavior. So let's add a couple more sequence items and then we'll describe what's going on here. So as I mentioned, the 5 parts of the animation are, Mario walks up, Mario sort of stands for a second, Mario jumps, he falls, and then he walks away. Okay, and then the reason that's giving me the wrong type here is because I haven't actually animated it yet. So let's go ahead and animate it. All right, so now what we have here is a sequence of tweens where throughout the entire duration of the animation, it will move across these tweens. And the amount of time it spends on each tween is dictated by this weight. So I actually want to be able to change these weights. So I'm actually going to create a nice little list of doubles called weights. And for now, let's just set them all to 1. Just because, I'm not sure how long they should be. But the key is, of all these tween sequences, I want them to use the same weights. Because otherwise our animations won't all line up. Now, in order to just get something on the screen, let's actually start using this. So let's create a body for our scaffold. Inside here, I'm going to use a stack. And inside here, we're going to have a couple animated builders. So you can see Mario up here in the corner. Now, what an animated builder is throughout your animation runtime, it calls this builder method repeatedly, actually potentially for every single frame of the animation. So inside this builder method, you can animate the properties. So since we have our X position animated, let's go ahead and say left is Mario X dot value. Top, let's just set top to 200 just so that he's not, right on top of the screen like that. And then let's go ahead and do that. So now we haven't actually started our animation, which is why Mario is not moving. So I'm just going to set this on repeat so that we can debug it. We'll just see the animation work over and over. So you should see Mario move an extremely insignificant amount. That's because I'm only animating from 0 to 0.5. Say if I throw 100 in here, then he'll actually animate over a somewhat longer distance. Let's restart the app. So you can see him kind of going ahead to animate. The reason it takes so long to repeat is just because of this tween sequence. So you can see that he goes halfway to 50, and then he waits for a very long time, which is these 3 items in the sequence, and then he goes ahead the rest of the way. Then the animation goes ahead and restarts. Now instead of 100, I want to use the screen's width So let's grab the size of the screen. You can do that with a media query. And let's just say size.width, and I'm going to say -16 just because Mario is 32 pixels wide. So if I say -16, then that means he'll go right to the center of the screen. All right, so you can see we got some really basic animations up and running. And now let's animate the rest of the fields. So for the Y position, we want him, as I said, we want him to walk up, we want him to wait, and then jump, and then walk off. So let's say his Y position starts at 0, while he's standing at 0, while he's jumping, it goes from 0 to 1, while he's falling, it goes from 1 to 0, and then while he's walking away, it stays at 0 once again. And then let's actually use this. So top minus, let's say he jumps, I don't know, 80 pixels. And we're gonna have to restart our Mario. Let's actually move him down a little bit just because he seems kind of high on the screen. We can use size height over 2. Let's go ahead and restart. Okay, cool. So it looks pretty weird because he's not really obeying the laws of gravity. So one thing we can do here is we can chain our tween through a curve, which I realize is a crazy combination of words, so I'm gonna go ahead and explain it in a second. But basically what this means, oops, sorry, we have to chain our tween through a curved tween. Basically what this means is that this tween will provide the basis value, and then it will pass the value through this tween, which a curve will just simply, take the value, so in this case 0 to 1, and fit it to a particular curve. And Flutter's kind of cool. We can actually look at these curves. So you can see here that, as it goes up, it slows down. This is commonly referred to as an ease out. And that's kind of how gravity works when you're jumping upwards. As you get higher in your jump, you're slowing down. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so it's closer, but I want to put a slightly more extreme curve on here, and you can see they have all of these. Let's start with quadratic and see what that does. Now obviously this isn't going to model the physics of the situation properly. I actually think that looks okay. One other thing I'm going to change is this weight. So I think the animation just spends too much time on the jumping part. So let's actually fix this weight. And by the way, the reason I have to keep restarting is because all of this code is in the init state. So Flutter is not going to reinitialize this widget when it hot loads. So if I make a change down here, so let's just say 2, if I make a change here, it will immediately hot reload. But if I make a change up here, it won't do that because this is my init state method. Okay, so we've done the jump up part of the animation. Let's do the jump down part. I'm going to change the weight once again to 0.3 because I think it should take around the same time to jump down as it does to jump up. Just copy this, add it here. And instead of easing out, we're just going to ease in, which is the reverse. So since we're falling, it makes sense to kind of reverse it. So let's rebuild this. Okay, that looks pretty good for now. I'm not going to worry too much about it because I think it makes sense to, figure out this stuff once you've done the rest of the animation. It looks a lot better when he moves faster. So let's stick with that for right now. Now, one other thing that I really want to get up and running is the frame, because him just being that same frame the whole time is kind of boring. So this is once again going to be a tween sequence. So I'm actually just going to copy this. Mario frame, except as I mentioned, it's not a double tween, it's just going to be an int value. For now, let's just say int tween begin 1 and 1. And just to make sure it's working, let's do our actual jump frame here. And for the walking frame, we can just use frame 2 for now. Obviously, we need to be alternating between all of the walking frames, but for now, I think that'll be best. So in here, all we have to do is say, instead of just using that 1, and then this is also very important, we have to turn on gapless playback. And all gapless playback means is that while it's loading, if this value changes, while it's loading the next value, it will just continue to show the previous value, so you won't see any flickering or anything like that. So this is an important value if you are animating this field. Let's go ahead and restart this. Alright, cool. So he kind of slides up, does this little jump, and then he slides away. Let's turn that slide into a walk. Now here's where it gets pretty interesting, because what we want to be doing is alternating between Mario 2, 3, and 4. So what we kind of want is for this tween to itself be a sequence. So let's do that. You can actually put a sequence inside of another sequence, but in the interest of some neatness here, I'm just gonna go ahead and create a method that returns an inner tween sequence. Okay, I'm also going to use what's called a step tween. I'll explain why in just a moment. And if you're using a step tween, you actually want to go one past where your destination is, because the step tween will never actually reach your destination. We'll just set the weight to 1 on that, and then we want to do that maybe, 4 or 5 times. So let's also do the walk animation here. And we'll restart. Alright, so this is pretty cool. This is kind of the entirety of our Mario part. I do want to explain why I used a step tween here, and I think the best way to explain that is actually just to turn them into int tweens, and we can see how the two tweens are different. And in order to do that, I do need to set those to 4 so that it doesn't go past. So you might be able to see Mario is kind of goose stepping. I don't know how to describe that, but basically what's happening is he's spending more time on the 3rd frame than he is on the 2nd and 4th frame. And that's because an int tween just simply rounds the value. So, it'll start at 2, and the minute it hits 2.5, it'll round up to 3. And then the minute it hits 3.5, it'll round to 4. So if you draw a little graph, you can see that he'll spend a lot more time on that 3rd frame, which is why we use a step tween, which actually does a floor function on the resulting value. So it spends an equal amount of time on each value, but it never reaches the last value. All right. Good stuff. So let's go ahead and create our final couple objects here. We need a block. So let's add some tweens for those. I'm actually going to copy the Mario Y tween because that's probably going to be similar to how our block functions. Block Y. And then I'll copy the Mario frame for the block frame. Okay, so for block Y, I'm going to remove these chains for now. So the block Y is very similar, and actually I only want the block to bounce when Mario actually hits it, which is going to be right around here. So instead of just having a simple tween here, let's do a tween sequence. Okay, cool. So I also just like to put types on these. I'm old school, it's easier for me to read. So what's going to happen with this block is it's just going to sit there for the first 3 phases of the animation. And then on the 4th phase, it's going to bounce up and bounce down. So let's go ahead and add the block into the animation. So we can copy Mario actually. Gotta have a comma here. And we'll say block frame. And then this is just gonna simply be, let's put it in the middle of the screen. And we'll start with Mario's height, minus 80, and then we'll actually subtract an additional height. And I'll explain that in just a minute. But let's just see how this looks. And do I even have anything? Yeah, so this is obviously not gonna work. Let's add a bunch of int tweens here. These should basically all be 1-to-1. And on the 4th part of the animation, I want it to go to 2. And then on the 5th part, I just want it to stay at 2. That's basically when it morphs into the brown block. Alright, that's way off the edge of the screen. That's because the left is the size width. I need that subtract by 2. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Nice. So it's a little low. Let's just move it up a little tiny bit. And just a little bit more. I don't mind if there's like a little bit of overlap. And I'm actually going to put him above Mario in the stack because I think in the real game Mario goes a little bit above the block sprite. Okay, that looks a little more like the real game. Okay, so there's basically the entire block. So not too complicated, and hopefully you can tell what some of these magic numbers represent at this point. This -95 just moves it above Mario, and then this -10 just represents the amount that it moves total. Alright, now let's figure out the coin. So luckily the coin is just going to be extremely similar to our block. So let's go ahead and copy our block. We'll just call this coin Y. In fact, I don't think it's going to be any different. So let's go ahead and add another one of these animated builders. And we'll just say, I think there's only one coin image, so we don't have to do that. And coin Y. Let's refresh. Oh, that's kind of cool. We need to obviously make this, 100 or something. Oh, there's a coin. That doesn't look high enough, so... Alright, so that's it. That's the finished animation. You know what? Let's move him up slightly. Bothering me. Okay, that looks better. So this is it. Now you might ask me, John, why would I do it this way? This was a decent amount of work. I had to write all this code myself. And the answer to that is really that this is going to depend on your situation. If you have a team that has designers that can make animations that are just image strips or GIF files, and you as an engineer can just easily add a GIF file to your project, then yeah, that's probably the way to go. But if you need an animation that updates, is very flexible, very responsive to what the user is doing, or, for example, a loading bar, this could easily be a loading bar, then you might want to do something more like this, or use a utility like Rive, or I think the library itself is actually called Flare, in order to do some kind of responsive vector-based illustration. So just to show off that dynamicism a little bit, I think I'm just going to quickly code this up so that we can control how many times Mario hits the block. And that'll just show off a little bit of why you might want to do the animation this way, and I think it'll be a pretty good example. So let's go ahead and do that. It shouldn't take very long. Okay, so we've just made a couple changes here so that you can change the number of times he hits the coin. I wanted to make it ridiculous. I could do that. Let's increase the duration slightly. Okay, that'll end the tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and please stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more tutorials, so I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.